When Spec Ops The Line was released, you probably had a few questions about it, like, is it any good? And where the hell did they get the name Spec Ops from anyway? You'd expect a name like that to be attached to a late 90s budget game franchise. So you have been watching my show. The 2012 Spec Ops game is actually a reboot of an older franchise, one that's been dormant for so long you'd be forgiven for thinking it's a new IP. It was started in 1998 by Zombie Studios, who we know from Shadow Ops, and who currently make the Blacklight games. Zombie made Spec Ops, Rangers Lead the Way, and its expansion for Windows in '98, and a sequel 1 year later which also had a standalone mission pack for the Dreamcast. The Rangers Lead the Way wasn't originally a budget game. The reason the Spec Ops name is synonymous with 90s budget games is that the series made the jump to the PlayStation with 4 games in 2 years, all of them budget priced. The PS1 titles were developed by other companies, mainly Runecraft Ltd., known for such masterpieces as Barbie Explorer and Monopoly Party. Even Rockstar was scheduled to make a Spec Ops game for PS2 at one point, but it was cancelled. During the late 90s, the tactical shooter genre finally came into its own. The genre got its abortive start as far back as 1993, with Electronic Arts' SEAL Team, but that game's clunky interface and sluggish 3D graphics sent the tactical shooter into hibernation until 1998, the year that brought us Police Quest SWAT, the first in the long-running Delta Force series, and the one and only Rainbow Six. 4 tactical shooter series started in 1998, and I think we all know which one left with the gold. So the question is, how does Spec Ops stack up? There's nothing really wrong with the game's presentation. The packaging is awesome, and the box has a stylish matte black finish and texture, and the images are glossy and almost raised up from the box. It is a rare treat for me to display games like this. The contents of the box are restricted. Damn it. So that's Spec Ops, and if the quality of the box is any indication, it's probably pretty cool. I won't tell if you won't. Inside is a nice spiral-bound manual, which is much shorter and to the point than most game manuals in the 90s. Panasonic, who distributed this game, perhaps accounting for the ludicrously high quality of the box printing, sweetened the deal by throwing in a voucher for $25 off a game of paintball. Wow. Ah, crap, it expired 14 years ago. So much for my weekend plans. As the first release from the glut of tactical shooters that cropped up in '98, Spec Ops was kind of breaking new ground, or re-breaking SEAL Team's old ground. It's similar in gameplay style and perspective to SEAL Team, the only tactical shooter that really preceded it, although SEAL Team took place in Vietnam, and Spec Ops took place in that weird post-Cold War twilight where we didn't know who to be angry at. So mostly we just stuck with the Russians until North Korea came along. The important difference between Spec Ops and other tactical shooters is in the control and perspective. Spec Ops uses a strange, high-angle third-person camera, but you only have vague control of your character. In terms of gameplay realism, Spec Ops falls between Delta Force and Rainbow Six. Delta Force is realistic looking, but that's about as far as it goes. The actual gameplay retains the high body count and simple controls handed down from earlier FPS games. Rainbow Six, on the other hand, takes it to the extreme, with very unforgiving damage and accuracy systems. Moving and shooting are almost mutually exclusive. Enemies and Rainbow operatives both go down with as little as one shot, and the enemies rarely outnumber you in individual fights. Spec Ops takes a middle-of-the-road approach. The levels have dozens of enemy mooks to gun down, and your rangers have forgiving health bars, but you still have to stay low and avoid contact in order to succeed. The combat in Spops, however, is extremely difficult in ways I don't think were intended by the developers. The big problem with the game is that you don't aim manually. Instead, your character picks and tracks targets automatically when he's close enough to them. You still get to pull the trigger, but it's hard to tell what you're aiming at, and when you're shooting but can't hit anything, there's no indication as to why. Sometimes your ranger will auto-aim at something off-screen, and you have to desperately flail your mouse to try to get him to notice a target that's right in front of you. The box even tries to claim that as a feature. Intuitive interface? Is that what that is? To me it looks like I'm shooting at someone I can't even see. Spec Ops features a wide variety of optics, some of which do allow you to aim manually, but because of how slow they are to use, they're only useful for sniping. Each gun can also be equipped with binos, which don't allow you to shoot. These are clearly supposed to be binoculars that for some ineffable reason are listed in the scopes menu. As in every good tactical shooter, you can select your equipment before each mission, though in Spec Ops you are only given a choice between preset loadouts, with different ones being available on different missions. The only important piece of kit is the satchel charges, which are used to destroy targets in basically every mission. There are almost as many scope choices as there are weapons, and you can evidently have as many scopes as you want. Since it takes no time at all to switch between scopes in-game, I like to imagine that they're all stacked on top of each other, or lined up on an accessory rail. None of these scopes really works for me because you can't invert mouse aiming. You can't change any of the controls, actually. That means I have to rely on the Ranger's automatic target acquisition skills, which as previously mentioned leave something to be desired. The weird thing is, Rainbow Six also had an automatic target acquisition system. We called it auto-aim. With auto-targeting on, your character would aim at any enemy visible on the screen. The difference is, that worked. Spec Ops doesn't. Because of the first-person perspective and manual camera controls in Rainbow Six, you could meet the auto-aim halfway, point your screen at a guy, let the AI adjust, and fire. It worked pretty well, and without it the speed of combat would be slowed down and less realistic than the developers clearly intended. Most gunfights in Spec Ops consist of you looking around, hoping desperately that the AI will catch on to the bad guys shooting him at point-blank range, followed by shouts of rage when you get lit up by some mook you've been blazing away at uselessly for the last 5 magazines. The levels of Spec Ops are large and completely open, but many of them have an almost random approach to enemy placement, so you get shot at from all angles. New enemies respawn constantly behind you, leaving you perpetually surrounded. When enough enemies are nearby, it quickly becomes impossible to get your character to cooperate with you. Some enemies will also shoot at you from outside the game's draw distance, which blows a dick. You have 2 rangers for each mission and can switch back and forth between them whenever you feel like it. I wouldn't describe the squad AI as smart, or competent, or good, but he never does anything outright retarded. A big part of that is his lack of responsibility. You can give 4 basic commands, the usual wait, follow, attack, move, but he can't complete objectives or do anything on his own. Spec Ops was made using Zombie's in-house Viper engine, which handles the huge outdoor environments reasonably well. The real-time Vertex-colored lighting system is advanced for the time and looks especially sweet on night missions, but then you have your night vision or thermal sights on all the time, so you don't get to enjoy it. In order to make the large levels work, the draw distance is low, and the area around you pages in and out of the memory as you move. This results in noticeable pop-in, which on city levels especially is an immersion-seeking missile. Still, even with these memory-saving techniques, the environments are low detail and the character models are Lego-level blocky. Supposedly the Rangers were mocapped, but I wouldn't believe it if it wasn't in the manual. One of the game's biggest failings is the difficulty. Spec Ops is hard. There is no funny way to say it, it is just difficult and even annoying at times. It's not challenging. Rainbow Six is challenging. Plenty of games are challenging, but Spec Ops is hard. Even on the lowest difficulty, hard to play. There are different missions around the world, each split up into separate phases you play through one at a time. Every mission has a background cinematic, which is presented in a cool documentary style that feels very authentic. These cinematics aren't really briefings. They set the scene well, but they don't say anything about your objectives. Before each phase, you get a page that lists objectives, but with no real insight as to where they are or how to complete them. Most levels start you in a featureless patch of wilderness, so you have to pick a direction and just go for it. The manual tells you to use your GPS to get your bearings, but all it shows you is the cardinal direction you're looking at. It's basically a compass. If I bought a GPS and all it showed was compass directions, I would ask for my money back. If you forget what you're trying to do, or you complete an objective and need a new one, you can use your SATCOM radio to get a very brief reminder from HQ. The radio also factors into some missions, like radioing for extraction only after you've already taken out AA guns, and you usually use the radio to end the mission phase after you finish all the objectives. Not having an objective screen or a magical radar map is a nice touch of realism that makes you feel more like a soldier and not an omniscient controller of the battlefield. Enemies are scattered liberally about in every level, and they respawn continuously, so you'll be in nearly constant contact for the whole of the mission. Not only that, but your character always fires in bursts, burning through ammo on your rifle weapons when you're trying to conserve it, but preventing you from shooting fast enough to kill enemies at close range when you're using a machine gun. Machine guns and AKs fire in bursts of 4, meaning they always have 2 rounds at the end of every magazine you're not allowed to use, which doesn't cause any problems, it just seems uncommonly lazy. You can pick up enemy weapons and ammo to supplement your arsenal, and there are piles of NATO rounds and medical supplies lounging around your generators just waiting to be collected. You can sometimes find extra satchels and supply piles in enemy bases. Apparently terrorists like to stockpile explosives near fragile equipment. The preponderance of medical kits also makes the game a bit weird. You have a big health bar and an armor bar, but you take damage quickly when being shot at. Health kits can be used to instantly recover most of your health bar though, so as long as you keep them selected you can withstand a ludicrous amount of punishment in combat, short of being blown up by a tank or run over by a truck. Some games are difficult by design, some games are difficult by accident, and some games are pointlessly difficult for no adequately explored reason. Spec Ops is a mix of the first two. Moving slowly, staying low, observing before you start shooting, limited carrying capacity, all of these things are acceptable, realistic kinds of difficulty. The vague controls and inability to aim, lack of a map or waypoints, and the stupid number of enemies are not acceptable kinds of difficulty. Spec Ops doesn't feel very tactical, since you're trading shots back and forth with most enemies you encounter, and the way everything fires in measured bursts makes it feel very mechanical. Bullets and tracers seem to spew randomly from the space in front of you, rarely matching up to where your gun is aiming, which adds another layer of abstraction that makes it tough to really get immersed in the game. The reason I didn't go into more detail about the missions is that there isn't any stupid or awesome stuff to talk about. The realistic missions and environments help make SPOPs feel very authentic, and that might make it worth playing. If you're not a fan of the tactical shooter genre like I am, then you'll be acutely aware of just how badly SPOPs has held up over the years. Not just graphically, because let's be honest, Delta Force's voxel graphics aren't exactly state-of-the-art anymore either. Beneath its tactical, realistic veneer, SPOPs is a very simple game that doesn't stand out much. If it hadn't been first to the tactical shooter party, it would be totally forgettable. I can see myself enjoying this game almost 15 years ago, but so many other more important games came out in 1998 that Spec Ops, with its clunky gameplay and graphics that bounced off the polygon ceiling so hard they left a crater, doesn't impress. I'm going to introduce a new thing here called the Collectability Index, a scale which I invented just this second, which will help you decide if a game is worth tracking down or not. If a game rates a 10 on the Collectability Index, it's a classic that all gamers should own. This would be for games like Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, Daikatana, and StarCraft. A 1 means nobody should own it, not even the most extreme of the extreme collectors. This would be for the bland or otherwise extremely mediocre games. Here's looking at you, Quest 64. Spec Ops gets a 6 out of 10, recommended if you're into tactical or military shooters. If you want to give it a shot and see how the tactical shooter genre began, I have a few tips for you. First, I'd recommend staying away from the gold and platinum releases of the game. On paper they sound fine. The gold release contains extra missions from the Ranger Team Bravo expansion and new features like customizing controls and choosing customized loadouts, the latter of which allows you to take even more scopes. But you miss out on the 3DFX graphics, which have all the historical appeal to the game. Without them, the game is darker and uglier, even if it is a bit sharper around the edges. So try to get the original release. It'll be harder to find and maybe a bit more expensive, but definitely worth it if you want to experience the game. My second tip, Spec Ops was designed to use Voodoo FX cards, which can cause some compatibility issues on modern systems. You can install the game in software mode, but it'll look better if you use 3DFX hardware mode. To fix the compatibility issues, download a 3DFX glide wrapper like Nglide, and you'll be good to go. The game installs and runs just fine in Windows 7, even 64-bit. And that's how the Spec Ops franchise started. So what does Spec Ops The Line have to do with a decade-and-a-half-old tactical shooter series? Absolutely nothing. I bet they just tacked the name on there to sell a few more copies to guys like me. Wait, what am I talking about? There are no guys like me.